Okay, here's example 3 with using reference angles to evaluate a trig function. So remember, the first step in this sort of thing is always find the reference angle. Okay, but just like in examples 1 and 2, we actually already found the reference angle in an earlier video. So we're not going to go through that process again. But if you haven't seen that video, check the video description for this one, and there will be a link to that other video there, so you can watch that. Anyway, the reference angle for 5 pi over 3 is just pi over 3. So we're just going to use that fact because we already established that in a previous video. Okay, so anyway, what we want to do is use this. We talked about this in more detail when we did example 1, so we're just going to kind of gloss over the details here. But anyway, if alpha is the reference angle for a given angle theta, then cosine of theta is the same thing as cosine of alpha with a plus or minus sign in front of it, and this sign, SIGN sign, depends on which quadrant theta is in. Okay? And this is true for all 6 trig functions, not just cosine. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So first, so we already know the reference angle, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and draw this picture. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't know the reference angle ahead of time, you would have to find the reference angle, and part of that process is drawing this picture. So you would end up drawing the picture anyway. Let's go ahead and draw. So 5 pi over 3 is in quadrant 4, right? So pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, 5 pi over 3 is down here. Okay, so here's 5 pi over 3. Okay, 5 pi over 3 is down here. Now again, just like in examples 1 and 2, you could say, well, hey, isn't that a special angle on the unit circle? So can I just look and say cosine is the x-coordinate, sine is the y-coordinate? Yeah, you could, but the instructions say use reference angles, and we want to see another way of evaluating these sorts of things here. Okay? So it's good to see many different ways, just so that we understand that for trig, for problems with evaluating trig functions, you really can approach it a few different ways. Okay, so anyway, 5 pi over 3, so let's write this down. 5 pi over 3 is in quadrant 4. Okay, so what does that tell us about the signs, SIGN signs, of these two trig functions here? So since 5 pi over 3 is in quadrant 4, then what do we say? So cosine of 5 pi over 3. Okay, if you're in quadrant 4, you're to the right of the y-axis, which means the cosine is positive, because remember, cosine corresponds to the x-coordinate on the unit circle. And since you're to the right of the y-axis, the x-coordinates are positive, so the cosine is positive. How about the sine? Sine of 5 pi over 3 is negative, because if you're in the 4th quadrant, remember, sine corresponds to the y-coordinates, so if you're in the 4th quadrant, you're below the x-axis where the y-coordinates are negative, so the sine should be negative. It is negative. Sine of 5 pi over 3 will be negative. Okay, so this tells us how to determine whether we have a plus or a minus sign here. Okay, so now when we do this, cosine of 5 pi over 3 is the same as cosine of the reference angle, and the reference angle we said is pi over 3, which we found out in an earlier video. So again, check this video description if you want to see the process of how to find this reference angle. And now, is it a plus or a minus sign? Well, we just found out since cosine of 5 pi over 3 is positive, there's no minus sign here. Okay, so it's just going to be that. Okay, now what is the cosine of pi over 3? So that's one of the ones that hopefully we will have memorized, but if not, we can just go back to the unit circle and say, okay, cosine of pi over 3 is the x-coordinate, which is 1/2. Okay. And sine of 5 pi over 3, that's the same as the sine of the reference angle, but it might have a minus sign in front of it, and this time it does, because remember, sine of 5 pi over 3 is negative, it's less than 0, okay, because 5 pi over 3 is in the 4th quadrant, so the sine of 5 pi over 3 is negative, so this means that we do include the minus sign now, so we have to slap on a minus sign here. Okay. Sine of pi over 3 is root 3 over 2, so we have negative root 3 over 2. Okay. And that is the answer for example 3 of using reference angles to evaluate trig functions.